This man accidentally entered the real-life backrooms and was found dead 3 weeks later. In January of 2017, 71-year-old Bernard Gore was supposed to meet his wife and daughter at a Westfield mall in Sydney, Australia, but never showed up. He'd apparently been doing some shopping on his own before they showed up, then completely disappeared without a trace. After frantically searching for her husband who suffered from dementia, Angela Gore filed a missing persons report with local authorities. Bernard was last seen by a store clerk who said the man looked confused on the morning of his disappearance. Investigators were initially hopeful when surveillance footage showed Bernard walking towards a fire escape, but they didn't realize that through the exit was a complete labyrinth of stairwells, confusing hallways, and self-locking doors. In fact, the entire fire escape stretches for 8 miles, and numerous mall shoppers have been lost down there before, with one woman describing it as a maze from a nightmare. Accordingly, it took police 3 weeks to finally locate Bernard's lifeless body in the stairwell. He was likely wandering around the fire escape for up to an entire week before eventually succumbing to natural causes. Bernard's death was officially ruled the result of a misadventure. As part of a grim psychology experiment starting in 1961, triplets Edward Gallen, David Kellman, and Robert Shafran were separated at birth. They were placed with adoptive families who were lower class, middle class, and upper middle class, none of whom were aware of the other siblings or any part of the experiment. According to their adoptive parents, as babies, all 3 of them would bang their heads against the bars of their cribs in distress. This was likely the result of severe separation anxiety, which continued on as the boys got older. By the time they were college age, David and Edward had been in and out of psych wards, while Robert was on probation after his connection to a 1978 murder. A few years later, they were reunited through happenstance but never fully recovered from their mental health issues, as Eddie tragically took his life at the age of 33 after a lifelong battle with depression. In 2021, a Pennsylvania special ed teacher sexually assaulted a 14-year-old student. She then got out on bail and continued meeting with the boy until one day she saw police approaching and shot herself right in front of him. In 2010, 80-year-old Maria de Jesus Arroyo was pronounced dead after suffering a heart attack and brought to an LA morgue. A few days later, morticians returned to pull her body from the freezer and found her corpse suddenly covered in bruises as if she was beaten up. It was later determined that she was still alive and tried to get out, breaking her nose in the process, but she eventually froze to death. In 2005, the Liverpool soccer team reached the European Champions League final against AC Milan. But they were down 3-0 at halftime and defeat looked inevitable. That's when depressed Liverpool fan Mark Houghton had seen enough and decided to take his own life. But in the second half, Liverpool managed to score 3 times to tie it up, and ended up winning on penalties in one of the greatest comebacks in team history. During the 1980s, Rebecca Schaeffer was the star of the popular CBS sitcom My Sister Sam. But in 1989, she was fatally shot in the doorway of her West Hollywood apartment by an obsessed fan who had been stalking her for over 3 years. The 21-year-old's death led to the passing of some of the first anti-stalking laws in America. This devastating photo was taken by Tom Stoddard during the Sudanese famine in 1998. It shows a well-nourished Sudanese man stealing a bag of corn from a starving child after it was given to him by a charity. Here's a photo of the unidentified victims of John Wayne Gacy being laid to rest at a mass funeral. In 2006, 18-year-old Ryan Waller was shot in the face during a Phoenix home invasion. His girlfriend was killed, but Ryan somehow survived. However, police mistakenly treated Ryan as a suspect, not a victim. Despite a severe bullet wound in his head, Ryan was interrogated for hours and denied medical treatment. He eventually passed away as a result of the horrific negligence. In 1996, mountain climber Beck Weathers and his team attempted to scale Mount Everest. But after coming down with a bad case of snow blindness, Weathers got stuck in a severe blizzard with a wind chill of -100 degrees and soon fell into a hypothermic coma. He miraculously survived, but had to have his nose and both hands amputated as a result of severe frostbite. Nicknamed Mr. Titanic, this was the last photo taken of French diver and Titanic expert Paul-Henri Nargeolet. He saw the Titanic 37 different times before dying on his 38th trip on board OceanGate's Titan submersible. In 1986, a young Indian flight attendant named Nirja Banat was on a plane that was hijacked. The terrorists were targeting Americans, so she hid the passports of all 44 Americans on board. Instead of saving herself, she helped the other passengers escape and died while shielding 3 children from a hail of gunfire. One of those children is now a captain for a major airline and says that Banat was his #1 inspiration. Kim Jong-un's older brother Kim Jong-nam was supposed to be the next heir to North Korea's throne, but he's believed to have lost his position at the age of 30 after trying to get into Disneyland Japan with a fake passport. Because of the embarrassment he caused his father, Jong-nam was exiled from the country and later assassinated by the North Korean government after many failed attempts. In 2006, 27-year-old Ohio State medical student Brian Schaefer entered a bar with some friends. After security cams recorded him entering through the bar's only public entrance, Schaefer was never seen exiting the bar and has not been seen nor heard from since. Here's an example of a pillory, which was used as a form of capital punishment in 19th century China. The man in the photo can't reach his face with his hands, so he must rely on pedestrians to feed him and give him water like a dog. The device also made it incredibly hard to sleep comfortably, essentially torturing the prisoner until they died from starvation. In 2004, Thomas and Jackie Hawks decided to sell their 55-foot yacht to spend more time with their family. Soon enough, former Power Rangers actor Skylar Delian contacted the couple saying he was interested in purchasing. Tom and Jackie were suspicious of Skylar at first, but they became more receptive when his pregnant wife Jennifer and their other child came to the next meeting, so they agreed to take him on a test run of the boat. Skylar brought with him 2 associates who, unbeknownst to Tom and Jackie, turned out to be former convicts. Once they were on the boat, the 3 men beat Thomas and Jackie, overpowered them with tasers, tied them up, and forced Thomas to sign the yacht away to Skylar. Afterwards, they tied the couple to the boat's anchor and threw them overboard to drown. Their bodies were never recovered. Days afterwards, Delian tried to empty the couple's bank account, but the entire plot was soon foiled when the accomplices confessed to the heinous murders. Thankfully, Skylar and Jennifer Delian will now spend the rest of their lives rotting away in prison. Actress Lisa Robin Kelly, who played Eric's sister on That 70s Show, had a major drinking and drug problem. She was soon replaced on the show and ended up dying of an overdose while in rehab. In 2012, a Missouri family sued the previous owners of the house they purchased after brown recluse spiders started bleeding from the walls. An expert estimated that the house was infested by at least 5,000 of the venomous spiders. In 2020, a Florida man was arrested for allegedly sticking his hand in peanut butter and punching his neighbor who was allergic to nuts. Just last Friday, Idaho Governor Brad Little signed a bill that would allow firing squads to execute death row inmates when lethal injection drugs are unavailable. This is because it's becoming increasingly difficult to obtain these drugs since pharmaceutical companies don't want their products to be associated with killing people. Right. As a child, Robert Downey Jr. was always surrounded by drugs. His father introduced him to marijuana when he was only 6 years old and allowed him to start drinking once he turned 8. By the time he became a teenager, Robert had already been addicted to cocaine, heroin, and prescription pills. RDJ struggled with these demons for more than 30 years before finally deciding to turn his life around in 2003. This was the last photo taken of Semra Aysel before she was pushed off the cliff by her husband Hakan. The pregnant 31-year-old fell for more than 1,000 feet and died immediately along with her unborn child. In 2013, an 8-year-old girl found the lifeless bodies of her parents, brother, and grandmother in her basement. They were apparently poisoned by highly toxic gas emitting from rotten potatoes after going down one by one to check on the person who went down before them. The only reason the girl didn't die was because her grandma must have left the door open before dying, allowing the gas to dissipate. When Prince died in 2016, he didn't leave a will for his estate worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Within 3 weeks of his accidental overdose, nearly 700 people claimed to be his half-sibling in hopes of cashing in on his death. In 1964, an accident at a nuclear facility in Rhode Island resulted in the largest single full-body dose of radiation in history. The victim received the equivalent to 700,000 x-rays at the same time and died in total agony 49 hours later. Here's a photo of serial killer John Wayne Gacy hugging his sister just before his execution. The killer clown murdered at least 33 young men and boys and hid their remains under his house. He was executed by lethal injection in 1994. In 2005, Indiana man Anthony Stockelman essayed and murdered a 10-year-old girl named Katie. Unfortunately for him, Katie's uncle was an inmate at the same prison he was sent to. As payback for what he did, the man tattooed the words Katie's Revenge across Stockelman's forehead. This was one of the last photos captured of Steve Jobs, the genius behind Apple. It was taken just a few days before he passed away from pancreatic cancer on October 5, 2011. During World War I, 20-year-old French soldier Albert Roche was found sleeping on duty and was sentenced to death for abandoning his post. But thankfully, a messenger arrived just moments before his execution to tell the full story. Albert had crawled for nearly 10 hours under enemy fire to rescue his wounded captain before passing out from exhaustion. In 2013, a Chinese businessman hired a hitman to take out his competitor for $282,000. But the hitman hired another hitman to do the job, offering $141,000. That man then hired another hitman, who hired another hitman, who hired another hitman. The fifth hitman, who was offered $14,000 for the job, tried convincing the target to fake his own death. But instead, he reported the threat to authorities, and all 6 men, including the original businessman, were sent to prison. In 2010, the teenage daughter of Michelle Kalina came across something horrifying in her mother's closet, the decomposed remains of 5 babies. Over the course of 14 years, Michelle gave birth to at least 5 children, ending their lives immediately after they were born. She was sentenced to between 20 and 40 years in prison. When Frank Zappa was a child, he always played with the mercury that his chemist father brought home from work, often covering his entire bedroom floor with the element. But childhood exposure to mercury is now known to cause prostate cancer as an adult, which Zappa would end up dying from at the age of 52. In 1978, over 2,000 students from Pennsylvania tried to set the world record for the largest game of tug-of-war. But instead, the 2,000-foot rope snapped, releasing several thousand pounds of stored energy. Nearly 200 students were wounded, 5 had their fingertips severed, and hundreds more received second-degree burns. On one night when Charlize Theron was 16 years old, her drunken alcoholic father was firing bullets into the door to her room, threatening to kill her and her mom. While he was reloading, Charlize's mother grabbed her own handgun and killed him. The shooting was ruled as self-defense and she didn't face any charges. In 1704, Sir Isaac Newton predicted that the world as we know it would end around the year 2060. He believed humanity would then progress into an era of divinely inspired peace. A tiger's tongue is so rough that it can lick your skin off with only a few licks. At over 3,500 years old, the senator was the name of the oldest bald cypress tree and the 5th oldest tree in the world overall. But it was accidentally burned down in 2012 when 26-year-old Sarah Barnes lit a fire inside the tree to see the meth she was about to smoke. On the morning of October 9, 2020, 27-year-old Texas woman Taylor Parker was pulled over by a state trooper after driving erratically. She explained that she had just given birth to the baby on her lap, so they were both brought to the hospital. But upon examining her, doctors realized she hadn't actually been pregnant at all, and the true horrors began to unfold. It turned out that Taylor had a hysterectomy when she was younger and therefore couldn't bear children, which her husband threatened to leave her over. In response, Taylor spent 35 weeks completely faking a pregnancy, making herself look pregnant, faking ultrasounds, and even throwing a gender reveal party. Around the time the baby was supposed to be due, Taylor stabbed her pregnant friend over 100 times before cutting her baby out of her abdomen while the woman was still alive. Both the baby and her mother ended up passing away, and Taylor Parker was later sentenced to death for her unspeakable actions. In 2004, 11-year-old Japanese schoolgirl Natsumi Tsuji led her best friend into an empty classroom where she promised to show her a new game. That's when Natsumi blindfolded the girl and ruthlessly slit her throat with a box cutter until she bled to death. Natsumi then returned to her classroom covered in blood while still holding the murder weapon. Spanish woman Aurora Rodriguez conceived her daughter as an experiment to try and create the perfect human. Her daughter Hildegard was able to read at age 2, spoke 4 languages by age 8, joined law school at 13, and became a professor there when she turned 18. But when Hildegard eventually tried to gain independence from her mother, Aurora concluded that the experiment was a failure and shot the girl dead while she was sleeping. Aurora was later infamously quoted saying, "The sculptor, after discovering the most minimal imperfection in his work, destroys it." She was sentenced to 26 years in prison, spending most of them at a mental asylum. Morbid Facts, Part 317. Bubble Boy David Vetter was born with a severe immunity disorder where he basically had no immune system at all, meaning even the most harmless germs could easily end up killing him. Because of this, he spent his entire life inside of a bubble and could only receive air, water, and food if it had been sterilized first. At age 12, David received a bone marrow transplant from his sister, the only treatment available that would allow him outside of his bubble. But the marrow sadly contained traces of a dormant virus, and David passed away a few months later. Kidam Cave in Kenya is believed to be the original source of Ebola and Marburg, two of the deadliest diseases known to man. A 2007 expedition found evidence that the vector species was most likely the African fruit bat, or more specifically, their guano. Either way, the cave is known to scientists as one of the most dangerous places on the planet. To lose a third of his body weight for his role in The Machinist, where he weighed 120 pounds, Christian Bale pushed his body to extreme limits, consuming nothing but coffee, a can of tuna, and a single apple every day. His goal was to reach 100 pounds before producers had to stop him so that he wouldn't die, and the movie ended up being a total flop. He then had to regain 100 pounds in 6 months to star in Batman Begins, but then had to lose 30 pounds again before filming because he'd bulked too much. In 1996, 7-year-old Jessica Dubroff tried to fly an airplane across the United States but crashed during a thunderstorm. This resulted in a law banning children from flying. In 1987, Andy the Goose was born without feet, so his owner eventually fitted him with Nike sneakers to help him walk, turning him into a famous role model for disabled kids. But one day in 1991, Andy disappeared from home and was found in a local park the next day with his wings and head ripped off. Police were able to identify the killer but didn't reveal their identity to the public. Jeanette McCurdy has described the relationship she had with her mother Deborah as both emotionally and sexually abusive. When Jeanette was 3 years old, her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent multiple surgeries and transplants. As a result, Deborah would perform routine vaginal and breast exams on Jeanette and never allowed her to shower alone until she turned 17. Living in poverty, her mother forced Jeanette into acting when she was 6 years old to financially support the family, and because Deborah had always wanted to become famous herself. McCurdy says that her mother was obsessed with making her a star and introduced Jeanette to a calorie restriction once she turned 11, leading to various eating disorders that Jeanette still struggles with, including anorexia and bulimia. McCurdy says that she refused to appear in the revival series of iCarly only because she didn't want to be reminded of her mother's abuse during the original show. Just last year, Jeanette released a book with the title I'm Glad My Mom Died 9 years after she passed away from breast cancer. In 2019, Cambridge University student Alana Cutlin tragically jumped from her airplane while returning home from Madagascar. She reportedly appeared normal while boarding the plane, but just 10 minutes after takeoff, she suddenly unbuckled herself before opening the door of the aircraft and jumping out without hesitation, falling nearly a mile to her death. Her family later stated that she'd experienced panic attacks in the past, and that she might have been suffering from a bad reaction to prescription medication. In 2012, 88-year-old Ilda Maciel died in the hospital after her nurses made a critical error while attempting to feed her. They accidentally injected chicken soup into her veins rather than into her feeding tube. In 2012, 23-year-old gaming addict Chen Rong-yu died of a heart attack while playing League of Legends for 23 hours straight in a Taiwanese cafe. It took staff hours to realize he was dead since he fell back in his chair and his arms were still stretched out toward his mouse and keyboard. Gordon Ramsay's father was a violent alcoholic who regularly abused he and his mother. One of his favorite things to do was to call Gordon a gay little boy because cooking was for poofs. He became so aggressive at times that Gordon and his mom often feared for their lives while at home. In 2017, a 9 weeks pregnant Brazilian woman suffered a stroke and was declared legally dead. Although doctors said the babies had no hope for survival, the brain-dead woman was kept alive for 123 days before delivering a healthy pair of twins. After growing up with a chronically bloated stomach, Sanju Bhagat went to the ER in 2006 with severe abdominal pain and difficulty breathing. Doctors were astonished to discover that the twin he must have absorbed in utero was still living in his abdomen and surviving off his blood supply. The half-formed twin had limbs, long fingernails, hair, and even genitalia. Doctors eventually removed the parasite and Bagot made a full recovery. In 2023, 92-year-old dementia patient Tom McDonald poured washing detergent over his bowl of cereal thinking it was milk. After eating most of the bowl, he told his daughter he wasn't feeling well and was soon rushed to the hospital, where he later died from acute toxicity. While 33-year-old actress Carol Lombard was on a war bond tour in 1942, she won a coin toss that determined she and her group would return home by plane instead of by train. Tragically, their flight would end up crashing into a mountain near Las Vegas, killing all 22 passengers on board, including 15 U.S. Army soldiers. 28-year-old Caitlin Jensen's life was changed forever after just a routine visit to the chiropractor. She went to have her neck adjusted for stiffness, during which 4 arteries in Caitlin's neck were accidentally dissected, resulting in a horrible stroke. She was reportedly without a pulse for 10 minutes until she could be revived by doctors. Caitlin was left with nearly full-body paralysis, only capable of blinking her eyes and moving her left thumb. Morbid Facts, Part 376. In 1998, Dana Carvey underwent open heart surgery to clear a blocked artery, but the surgeon operated on the wrong blood vessel. After spending 6 months recovering from the life-threatening botch, he won a $7.5 million lawsuit against the hospital and donated all of it to charity. In 2015, an Italian grandma accidentally sent 2 adults and 3 children to the hospital after making them hot cocoa that had expired in 1990. Pearl Jam's song Jeremy was based on the real-life classroom suicide of 15-year-old Texas student Jeremy Wade. He was released from a mental hospital once his parents' insurance money ran out, so he brought a revolver to class and shot himself in front of 30 students. In 2013, a collection of files revealed that the U.S. government lobotomized over 2,000 veterans against their will after World War II. They were lobotomized for reasons such as PTSD, depression, schizophrenia, and homosexuality. In 2013, 19-year-old Maureen Kelly was camping in the forests of Washington State with some friends when she suddenly told them that she wanted to go on a spiritual quest. She then stripped naked, crossed a nearby creek, and was never seen again. Police quickly discovered her bare footprints on the other side of the creek, but they ended at a paved road and the trail went cold. Often translated as death by 1,000 cuts, Ling Chi was a brutal form of execution used in China for nearly 1,000 years until it was outlawed in 1905. Journalist Sir Henry Norman described it as, "The criminal is fastened to a rough cross, and the executioner, armed with a sharp knife, begins by grasping handfuls from the fleshy parts of the body, such as the thighs and breasts, and slicing them off. Then the limbs are cut off piecemeal at the wrists and the ankles, the elbows and the knees, the shoulders and hips. Finally, the victim is stabbed to the heart and his head is cut off." Many reports detailed victims screaming for hours until they died. After learning from biological tests that Michael Jackson may not have been her real father, Paris Jackson attempted to take her own life. She said she idolized her father so much that the 2013 news led to her overdosing on pills and cutting her wrists before she was saved by the hospital. Firefighters in Illinois found a cockroach infestation so massive that they were forced to burn the house to the ground. They even made a ring of fire around the home so that none of them could escape or move to neighboring houses. After years of suffering from a constant runny nose, Kendra Jackson eventually found out that it was fluid leaking from her brain. After a serious car accident in 2013, she'd been losing about a half pint of brain fluid through her nose each day. There's a botanical garden in the UK filled only with plants that can kill you. It's only available through guided tours, during which many people have fainted due to the toxic fumes emitted by the flora. It holds over 100 deadly plants and is classified as the most dangerous garden in the world. Archaeologists excavating an ancient Roman sewer in Bulgaria stumbled upon this statue of Hermes that remains incredibly intact after 2,000 years. Measuring 6'8" and only missing part of its right arm, the statue is believed to have been intentionally buried underground by local residents after an earthquake rocked the region in 388 CE. A Corinthian helmet from the Battle of Marathon was found with the warrior's skull still inside. The Pons Fabricius is the oldest surviving bridge from ancient Rome that's still in use to this day. The bridge is still in its original location and condition, as its last major repairs took place in 23 BC. This olive tree on the island of Crete has a trunk that's 15 feet in diameter and is likely 2,900 years old. That means this tree has survived through the writing of the Odyssey, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and the birth of Christ, and amazingly still produces olives more than 2,000 years later. In 2018, 16-year-old Kevin Watkins was lagging horribly while attempting to play Xbox in his Georgia family's home. In an effort to improve the speed, he decided to change the Wi-Fi password to prevent others from using it and slowing down the connection while he was gaming. Soon enough, an argument broke out between Kevin and his mom, escalating to a point where his older sister Alexis had to step in to prevent Kevin from physically harming their mother. Tragically, Kevin placed Alexis in a strong chokehold and refused to let go despite his younger brother and mother begging for him to stop. By the time police arrived 15 minutes later, Alexis was no longer moving or responsive, but Kevin still had her in a chokehold. She had been starved of oxygen for a lengthy amount of time, resulting in extreme brain damage. Alexis was quickly rushed to the hospital, but was soon pronounced dead from asphyxiation. Kevin was tried for murder and sentenced to life in prison for the tragic incident. After Carrie Fisher passed away in 2016, her ashes were placed inside of an urn shaped like a giant Prozac pill. The giant pill was apparently her favorite possession since it was a reference to her battle with bipolar disorder. This famous mummy appeared to be satisfying himself during his final moments in 79 AD. To Catch a Predator was canceled in 2008 after a Texas district attorney took his own life when he was exposed as a child predator by the show. The entire scene was captured by an NBC camera crew that entered his home. In medieval Germany, a divorcing couple could legally settle their disputes with a marital duel. The man was given a weapon but had to fight out of a hole with one hand tied behind his back, while the wife could move freely with the rock-filled sack but had to wear weighted clothing. If the husband lost, he was beheaded, but if the wife lost, she was buried alive. After the divorce of his parents, Jack Black got mixed in with the wrong crowd and became severely addicted to cocaine at the young age of 14. It got so bad that he would steal money from his mom to fuel his addiction, but was eventually able to kick the habit after switching schools. Jack also lost his gay older brother Howard to AIDS at the height of the epidemic in 1989. In 2009, an Italian brain surgeon was having a heart attack in the middle of performing a delicate operation. But instead of getting treatment, he powered through the surgery upon realizing that his patient may have died if he stopped, and both made a full recovery. In 2009, U.S. Marine Brian Dennis was stationed in Iraq when he met a stray desert dog named Nubs. After someone brutally stabbed the dog with a screwdriver, the Marine nursed him back to health despite expecting him to die. They developed such a strong bond that when the unit left, Nubs picked up Brian's scent and trekked 70 miles through an active desert war zone to be with him. Dennis soon shipped the dog to his home in San Diego, and the two have been best friends ever since.